Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Birds NFL Week 6 preview. I'm Geoff Mosher. Now, normally I come out with this podcast preview show on Friday. There are a lot of injuries and there's a lot of instability at quarterback around the league. So I wanted to, give it a little bit more time before I made my previews here. And then also on Friday on the Inside the Birds platform, we had a lot of things come up later in the evening, including Andrew DeCecco's Inside the Locker Room podcast, which is a really great podcast. We approached Andrew about doing this. If you've noticed, Andrew has been more involved in Inside the Birds lately. We're really happy to have brought him on in a bigger capacity, and he's doing a weekly podcast called Inside the Locker Room, which gives you his thoughts on little notes and nuggets that he's gleaned from the Birds locker room throughout the week. And he's got some fantastic content and some good stories and really interesting things that he gets into that don't always make it through the media rounds throughout the week, which is what we like. We like to be different and separate ourselves a little bit. And Andrew does a great job of that. So make sure you check out Inside the Locker Room podcast. Came out on Friday. He's been doing it. He didn't do it over the bye week for obvious reasons, but it's back. That was the fourth edition of it, I believe, the one that came out on Friday. All right, so the NFL, I said there's a lot of injuries this week. There are a lot of games that might even be decided by who's healthy and who's not healthy. And then the one thing that really stuck out this week is that there are 8 road favorites, including all 3 4 o'clock games. If you live on the East Coast, all the 4 o'clock games are road favorite. The road team is the favorite to win. Sunday night football and Monday night football. Now, if you're a bettor and if you're big time into the old adages of betting or the rules that the home team is usually the favor, this might, complicate things for you. If I'm more of a pick'ems guy, I'm in a couple of pick'ems league, and I always do give the home team a little bit of the benefit of the doubt because for the longest time it's been that way in the NFL. You always see home teams. That's why I always say the home team gets the 3 points. But to see 8 road teams favored, and a lot, they're for good reasons. Some of these home teams are not good. Some of these home teams are making quarterback changes. Some of these home teams have a lot of injuries. So I'm not questioning too much of the lines on it. I'm just saying historically, the home team in the NFL wins the game, and there are a lot of home underdogs today. So that is definitely something to keep in mind when you're out there either doing your pick'em leagues or placing your bets. It's easy to just say, "Oh, this team's a road favorite. They're going to lose because they're on the road." Well, maybe not. Maybe not. This team's a bad team, but they're at home, but they're bad. They're going to lose. Maybe not. So you get a little juice at home. I mean, there are certainly teams. The Eagles are one that I think have a really good home field advantage because they have a great crowd. The Rams are a team that when they're home and depending on who they're playing, the stadium sounds like it's the other team's home venue because there's a lot of transplants in LA. Even when the Rams are winning, it sounds like the opponent is rooting a little harder than the home team fans are. So that's an advantage there for home teams. Of course, as we saw with the Eagles in Tampa a couple weeks ago, the heat in South Florida in September and early October, and the humidity, really, it's the humidity, can get to a lot of guys. It did for the Eagles in Tampa. Miami Dolphins, I always talk about, have a tremendous, usually when they're somewhat healthy, have a tremendous home field advantage in September and October. So it's an important thing. And to see 8 teams favored, 8 road favorites this week was a little bit interesting. But there is a lot going on. You've already seen the impetuous nature of the NFL. We are, only through 5 weeks. That's not a lot of time. Nobody is, I don't want to say nobody is technically out of it, but really mathematically or not, there are some obvious teams that you can say you don't expect them to rally and, and make the playoffs, but you're not truly out of it. And yet we've already seen several quarterback changes. We'll see some more today, and there could be some more in store today, depending on how it goes. And we've already seen our first head coach fired. The Jets obviously firing Robert Saleh, Woody Johnson making the decision after the Jets lost to the Vikings in London. Now, I can't sit here and defend Robert Saleh's coaching record. The Jets are not very good, but they're only 2-3. It's not like they're 0-5 or 1-4. And it's not like they lost that game to the Vikings by 3 touchdowns, but Woody Johnson wanted to make a change and he made a change. And Robert Saleh's overall record, and I get it, he didn't have a very good team for the first 2, 3 years of his tenure. Joe Douglas struggled at first to build that offensive lineup. It's better now. They bring in Aaron Rodgers. He's hurt. That's not Robert Saleh's fault last year that he got hurt, but they didn't really have a great backup at quarterback. Now, that's also not on Rob, but you know how it is. When you're the head coach of the team, owners don't fire themselves, and they weren't going to fire Joe Douglas in the middle of the year when you have a general manager who has to do the roster job every week. So the head coach is the one to go. Now, the question you ask yourself is, what did the Jets fix by firing Robert Saleh? If you were to pick any part of the Jets out, you would say that's good is their defense. And Saleh, as we know, is a defensive minded head coach. He was the 49ers defensive coordinator before the Jets hired him. So you have a guy presiding over your defense, and you have now excised him from the coaching staff, and you've taken your defensive coordinator, Geoff Ulbrich, who has been doing a very good job, and you move him to head coach. Okay. Your offense is the issue. We talked about this last week. They have no symmetry to their offense. It's a stale offense. It's a boring offense. There's no downfield element to it. And yet you fire your defensive minded head coach, and now you promote your defensive coordinator to head coach or interim head coach. And that takes him away from the defense a little bit. Now, I'm sure Geoff Ulbrich will be very involved in everything they do defensively. But as the head coach, you've got to give a little more of yourself to the rest of the team. So that takes him away from the defense just a little bit more. How does that fix a problem? I'm not sure. Now, you can fix the problem by making a play caller change on offense, which the Jets did. And it sounds like Robert Saleh was going to make that change anyway by giving play calling duties to Todd Downing, who has done play calling duties before in both, I believe, Tennessee and Las Vegas or Oakland. But either way, he's been a play caller before. It's addition by subtraction. You're taking it away from Nathaniel Hackett, who just hasn't done a very good job here or when he was with the Broncos, and you're giving it to somebody new. You're getting a fresh viewpoint on the offense, and you're hoping Todd Downing can bring a little bit more ingenuity, a little bit more pace, a little bit more guesswork for the defense to this Jets offense that isn't loaded with offensive playmakers, but you have Aaron Rodgers, you have Garrett Wilson, and you have Breece Hall, and a pretty good young running back in Braylon Allen as well. They're not bereft of weapons, but they're asking Aaron Rodgers to do way too much. I watched that game last week against the Vikings. He made some really nice throws, had a lot of drops. Alan Lazard dropped a touchdown. Somebody else dropped one on the Mike Williams dropped a pass. I mean, they're asking Aaron Rodgers to go be Aaron Rodgers of 6 or 7 years ago, but they've built a team with a really good defense, a way better offensive line, and better weapons to not have to rely on Aaron Rodgers to be the Aaron Rodgers of 6 or 7 years ago. But the offense was just so bland. Sound familiar? Eagles fans? That they needed a new look. And hopefully Todd Downing, for the Jets' sake, can be that person. But I just don't know how firing Rob Saleh helped the Jets get right unless the owner, who is known for being impetuous and who, by the way, did not hire this head coach. He was at the time, his son was running the organization because Woody was in London, ironically, as the, what do you call it? Can't think of the word when you're an ambassador to England in the Trump administration. And there are some people who think that, because of that, them losing in London and not looking very good offensively and him around all of his bigwig buddies out there in London, he was embarrassed and decided to fire Rob Saleh. Who knows? The point is, it's a fresh start here for the Jets. I just don't know that they fixed their problem by firing Rob Saleh. I think the bigger fix was handing play calling to somebody else. And we'll see if Geoff Ulbrich can continue to make the Jets defense good now that he is in charge of the whole team. All right, the Thursday night game, the Niners got a big win over the Seahawks. I've said for a while on this show, I was worried about how the Niners were going to start off the year, and I was right. I mean, they blew leads. They were 0-2 in the division. They had blown a lead to the Rams, I think a 13-point lead a couple of weeks ago. Then they blew a lead against the Arizona Cardinals the week before this game. So they really needed to come back. They needed to get a big win. It was in Seattle. You see the difference that it makes for them to have a healthy George Kittle and a healthy Debo Samuel. Kittle had a big game. He can still play when he's healthy. He's very important. And they're managing right now without Christian McCaffrey. When McCaffrey comes back, I think this team will take a big jump up. I had a feeling that the injuries, the Brandon Ayuk situation, the losses on defense that they had in the offseason were all going to take their toll at the start of the year for the Niners, and they did. And you could see they didn't have that killer instinct. If you can't hold on to if you're the 49ers and you are known for being at your best when you play with a lead, and then to watch them blow those leads, you can tell that they just were not right. Now it looks like they're getting right, and we'll see how they do going forward. The Seahawks have lost 3 straight after they started 3-0. Yes, they have injuries, especially on defense. They've got to get a little bit better, but they just need to. I think that they're still working in Mike McDonald as a head coach. He's still learning what he's got. Offensively, they have a new offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb. He came from the University of Washington with all those great receivers that he had there. He's trying to get this offense to be a little bit more vertical. There are times that it does look that way with Metcalf, with Smith and Jigba, with Lockett, but they run the ball still a lot with Kenneth Walker, and they just have not had the same offensive chemistry. You know, they went and lost to at home to the Giants, and then they lose to the 49ers. So they're on a 3-game losing streak. And they got the Falcons up next, then the Bills, followed by the Rams before they go into the bye. And then they come out of the bye with the 49ers. So at some point, Seattle has got to figure out a way to get itself right. All right. So week 6, 1:00 games. The big game, obviously, is the Washington Commanders are at the Ravens. The Ravens are 6.5-point favorites. That's fair. The Ravens are really flying high after a rough first 2 weeks, but Washington's 4-1, and they've won 4 straight games. They trounced the Browns last week, 34-13. They have a 1.5-game lead already in the NFC East, and I don't like to look ahead too much, but in 3 weeks, Washington is going to play Chicago, and you're going to have Jaden Daniels versus Caleb Williams, who's playing a lot better. And that one might be for the Rookie of the Year award right there, depending on the trajectory of both teams as they get to that point. Chicago's played a lot better. So the Washington defense, it's not great, but they've actually allowed less than 20 points in 3 of their last 4 wins, or 3 of their 4 wins. So it's not all Jaden Daniels, and yes, they can be beat in the passing game, but they're doing enough. They're sort of 49er-ish in how they're jumping out sometimes to some big leads and getting some points on the board quickly and making it difficult on the opposing offense to have to be a little bit more one-dimensional. The Ravens are coming on. They've won 3 straight. They overcame some mistakes and some turnovers to beat the Bengals in a just wild, wild Sunday game. That might have been the game of the year last week against the Bengals. They obviously got their Lamar Jackson magic to win that game. It's hard to believe Lamar's won 2 MVPs, but if you go check the numbers right now, he might actually be having a better season than both of his MVP seasons. So he's really come on. Derrick Henry has come alive as you would expect in that offense. The offensive line getting healthier. Ronnie Stanley, left tackle, playing well again. He's always beat up, but when he's healthy, he can play. And even though last year might have looked like not, the guy that he'd normally been because he'd been through so many injuries, it looks like he's playing better and becoming a rock for that offensive line again. Defense is still vulnerable. Defense is not the Ravens defense of old. I mean, look, they have a new defensive coordinator. They lost a ton of guys in the secondary, in free agency. They're just not the same. So it wouldn't surprise me if Commanders Ravens here is a high scoring game. But if the Ravens can get to 4-2 by winning this game after everything they've gone through, after the opening game loss against Kansas City, right? After blowing the lead at home to the Raiders. Obviously, they've got a new defensive coordinator. The tragic sudden death of their offensive line coach, I believe it was in August. That they had so much early adversity. If they can get to 4-2 and beat the red hot Commanders today, they're going to be in good shape, and they're going to be in a good spot. Now, I don't know if you saw, but they recognize some of their defensive shortcomings and the fact that they have a first-year coordinator in Zach Orr, former Ravens linebacker. They brought in Dean Pease to be a special advisor for the defense. Dean used to be a defensive coordinator for the Ravens, for some other teams in the NFL. He's been around the block. quite a bit, is a good defensive mind, smart idea by the Ravens and by Zach Orr to bring Dean back, just to give him a good fresh set of eyes for what they're doing defensively. Cardinals Packers, man, Arizona is a weird team. I mean, they are about as Jekyll and Hyde as it gets. I mean, they've beaten the Rams, they've beaten the 49ers, but they're so hot and cold. They play great halves and then they play terrible halves. Kyler Murray has a great game, then he has a meh game. I just don't know what that team is other than inconsistent. And now they have to go into Green Bay, and that won't be easy. But the Packers, they might be as Jekyll and Hyde as the Cardinals are. They are really tough to figure out. They got a good win last week over the Rams. It was close. The Rams are banged up, but the Rams are going to give you a fight. But man, you watch Jordan Love right now, and he just doesn't look comfortable like he did at the end of last year. It looks like it started even in the Eagles game, throwing off the back foot, rushing some throws. He threw an interception last week against the Rams. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. Go find social media, go Google it. It's a mind-boggling interception, not the kind of throw that you expect Jordan Love to make. He just needs to settle in, and I think the Packers are going to be the team, and they're 5-point favorites over the Cardinals, by the way. They're going to be the team that comes on a little bit later into the year because they are good. They're dealing with some injuries right now, and they're dealing with some turmoil and strife that is probably new to them. You saw Romeo Dubs was suspended. He wasn't happy with his role. He didn't show up for practice for 2 days, so they suspended him. They've been without Christian Watson. He's been hurt. Dontavian Wicks was dropping some balls. Right now they don't have, other than maybe Jaden Reed, they don't have a guy that is just playing really solid, consistent offensive football. Josh Jacobs has been fine, but it's really about Jordan Love and settling down. I just think when he settles down, it's crazy to think that they are, what are they? They're 3-2, but they're 2-0 with Malik Willis and 1-2 with Jordan Love. That makes zero sense. So that signals to me that the Packers just have to get on the same page, figure out their issues, and they will improve as the season goes on. They should be able to beat the Packers. I'm sorry, the Cardinals. Again, it just depends on which teams show up. Colts at Titans. All right, so this is an interesting game for Shane Steichen and the Colts. The Colts are 2-3, and Steichen here has two jobs, right? His job is to win games. That's first and foremost as head coach in the NFL. You have a good enough roster where you should be able to win games and be competitive in the AFC South. His other job, and really this is why he's here and why they drafted Anthony Richardson, is to develop Anthony Richardson into a legit quarterback, a guy who has all the tools in the world, very little starting experience, and who's looked like he's had little starting experience so far this year. So he's got to win games and develop the young quarterback. The problem is that when the young quarterback went out and Joe Flacco, the old veteran, came in again, just like last year in Cleveland, Flacco lights up the scoreboard. The Colts lost last week, amazingly, to the Jags, who were really struggling, but it wasn't because of their offense. Flacco threw for 359 yards and 3 touchdowns, no picks. It's not his fault. The defense collapsed and lost to an awful Jaguars team that suddenly woke up offensively. But the bottom line is the Colts are 0-2 in the AFC South. And if they lose this game to the Titans, they're 0-3. And then you start to wonder, do I really want to do I want to fall to 0-3 in a division that I think I can really compete, trying to get a wild card, but I'm also trying to develop my young quarterback. So Richardson looks like he's going to be able to play on Sunday. He was injured. That's why he didn't play last week. All right. And Flacco came in, did an unbelievable job. Richardson goes back. This is a good Titans defense. You wonder, does Shane Steichen at some point, if they're losing this game by more than 10, but he still feels it's winnable third quarter, does he go back to Joe Flacco? It does not help the Colts that they will not have Jonathan Taylor, so that puts a little bit more pressure on the passing game. And again, that's just got to be a seed in Shane Steichen's head about how well Flacco has played. And it's not a fluke anymore. Flacco won comeback player of the year last year. He went into the Browns offense when Deshaun Watson got hurt and did the same thing. And he helped the Browns win 11 games and make it to the playoffs. I'm not saying this guy is a franchise savior. Obviously, they didn't win a playoff game. Obviously, he throws balls that are at times interceptable, but he did his job as a backup quarterback. And he couldn't do it. He did it last week for the Colts and could do it again. On that note, hopefully the Titans and their quarterback, Will Levis, spent their bye week examining why he's got an NFL leading 6 interceptions and an NFL leading 9 turnovers. Hopefully, Will Levis understands that he must protect the ball. The Titans have a good defense. They're getting an honest running game from Pollard and Spears. They have pretty decent weapons in Ridley, in Hopkins. Okay? Protect the football. Protect the football. If they had protected the football a smidgen better, probably would have beat the Jets. So you could have been 2-3 in that game, and maybe another game along the way. One or fewer turnovers, you win. The difference between 1-4 and maybe 3-2 is just not turning the ball over. And these are not, he gets sacked. Right? These are some terrible, terrible turnovers that Will Levis is undergoing. So we'll see. Mason Rudolph, he has played already, and he could be looking over Will Levis's shoulder. I'm not sure Mason Rudolph is the answer either. And again, the job here for the Titans is to develop their quarterback, but there's only so much patience you're going to have when a guy turns the ball over that much. Speaking of quarterbacks, you got Texans at Patriots. Texans are 7-point favorites in New England. That's a big number. It should be. The Texans have not played great offensive football. They've been banged up at the running back position, and now they're going to be without Nico Collins for a few weeks. He's banged up. But with Diggs, with Tank Dell, you're good on the outside. And as long as CJ Stroud continues to play at the level that he plays, he is an excellent, excellent quarterback. He'll have some bad moments, but overall, he is really good. And the Texans should have enough to beat this Patriots team. The Patriots are 1-4. They're going to Drake May, as they should. They've lost 4 straight since that surprising season opening win against Cincinnati. And then remember, in week 2, they took the Seahawks to overtime. So for 2 weeks, the Patriots looked like they were a decent team. And then they got whitewashed by the Jets, and it's been downhill. They've had injuries. They're just not very good. They don't have a whole lot of playmakers. It was smart of the Patriots. I thought they were actually going to wait longer. Smart of the Patriots to try to do it this week while they're at home. However, Ramondre Stevenson is out. He was benched, but still came off the bench and had a big game last week. But he's going to be out, so they're going to have a tough time running the ball. Antonio Gibson's going to have to carry the workload. The offensive line's not great, so that's a problem for Drake May right away, and he just doesn't have a whole lot of speed at wide receiver. He's going to have to be smart. He's going to have to be methodical. He's going to have to take his shots when they're there. Probably going to have to connect early with Hunter Henry and some of it interior weapons. But I like the fact that now the third quarterback taken in the draft is going to get his shot. I like this. You'll have Williams, you'll have Jaden Daniels, and you'll have Drake May all playing this week. And look, you get a good eye at this quarter. You already have Bo Nix playing, so you're going to get a good eye on 4 of the 5 guys who went in the first round. Michael Penix is probably going to be waiting quite a bit unless there's an injury to Kirk Cousins. But yeah, Texans up. Texans favored by 7. Be hard to see them not winning that game. Bucks at Saints. Now the Bucks are 3.5-point favorites on the road, coming off a loss against a Saints team that plays well at home. You might say to yourself, well, why is that? Division team, pretty even teams. Well, as we mentioned earlier, the Saints have to go with Spencer Rattler today. And that's really interesting because Rattler he was a 5th-round pick, so it's another rookie quarterback starting in this game. It's interesting because he was not the backup quarterback. The backup was Jake Haener. Haener came in to replace Carr when Carr got hurt. And now they're going to the rookie 5th-rounder Rattler, who has a chance in this offense to maybe bring back the downfield element that the Saints have really lacked for the first 2 weeks. It's very simple why the Saints were explosive the first 2 weeks. It wasn't because Derek Carr was an amazing quarterback. In fact, I think their week 2 win over Dallas, when they scored over 40 points, he only had like 12 completions. What the Saints do with their new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, is run a Shanahan-style offense, and they put tight ends on the field, they put fullbacks on the field, and they run the ball with Kamara. You saw Kamara having great rushing efforts the first few weeks, and then that sets up an incredible play-action game for them, an under-center play-action game. Where have we talked about this before? Oh, yeah, the Eagles. We would love to see the Eagles with their great offensive line and their great running back, and with Jalen Hurts struggling a little bit and receivers down, right, to have gone under center more. We would love to see Kellen Moore put a little bit of more of that in the offense. Well, that's what the Saints offense is. But lately they haven't ran the ball. They had all offensive line injuries at center, at guard, and it was an impact. Even Kamara was a little beat up. They weren't running the ball as well. And because of that, they weren't able to set up that great downfield play action that they had for the first 2 weeks. Now, I believe they're healthier now on the offensive line. I know they'll still without Cesar Ruiz, the South Jersey kid, plays right guard, but I think across the board they're a little healthier. They will have Olave. They will have Shaheed. I think they're still banged up with Taysom Hill, and that makes a big difference. But Rattler's got an arm. And this is a guy who had a great Senior Bowl. He was named the Senior Bowl MVP. And this was a guy that personnel people said had really grown up from his freshman year at Oklahoma through the transfer to South Carolina and played well at South Carolina despite not much around him. So he's getting a shot and he's got an arm and he's a good athlete. And maybe he just brings enough of the unknown element for the Bucks, who have zero tape on him, to make it very difficult to play against. Now, the flip side of that is that it's really, really tough to be a rookie quarterback facing Todd Bowles' defense. Although I guess Bo Nix did a pretty decent job of it a couple of weeks ago when the Broncos beat the Bucks. But honestly, if you look at the box score, it's not like Bo Nix tore it up. They moved the chains methodically. But either way, the Bucks are. I like the Bucks. I know they lost to the Falcons in that wild game last Thursday night. I think it was. The backup receiver came in, caught the touchdown. Kirk Cousins at 500 yards. The Bucks were banged up defensively. They're getting healthier. I said last week this is going to be a tight 3-horse race in the NFC South. I liked the Bucks to win it. If the Falcons win it, it will not shock me. They're coming along. They have Carolina today. I'm sorry, the Carolina on Sunday. It makes it easier for them. But I do like this Bucks team. I like the experience. I've liked the way that the quarterback is playing. And to go into New Orleans, it will not be easy because it's never easy to win at the Superdome. But when the other team is starting a rookie quarterback picked in the 5th round, you've got to seize that advantage. And that's probably why they're 3.5-point favorites. So I think the Bucks, they just have to be able to run their offense. The Saints do have a good defense. They're beat up at running back position. We'll see what's going on with Rachaad White. Hopefully Bucky Irving can overcome the fumble issue that he had at the end of the game and play a bigger role. But yeah, you gotta like the Bucks in this game. And the only thing is the unknown factor of what Spencer Rattler might be able to do for the Saints offense. Falcons at Panthers. So we just talked about the Falcons. They are rolling. The Panthers are the opposite. They're 1-4. Now, you knew they were going to come back to earth after beating the Raiders 3 weeks ago behind Andy Dalton. And of course they would. I picked them to lose to Chicago last week. They did. I thought Chicago's defense would be way too overwhelming for Carolina. And it was. Chicago's defense has gotten a lot better. It is a good defense. And you get a temporary lift when you get a functional quarterback in, like Andy Dalton over Bryce Young. So you saw how the change at quarterback made a difference, gave a little bit more belief for a week or two. But the reality is the Panthers are still the Panthers. They're not a very talented overall team. Adam Thielen's been hurt. They don't have a whole lot of weapons at wide receiver other than Deontay Johnson. Really nothing in the tight end ranks. Their O-line is banged up. They're down 2 centers. Everybody knows we talk about this all the time on Inside the Birds. You need a left tackle, of course. You need good linemen everywhere. But if you don't have a good center who controls all the traffic, right, and don't even have a backup center, you're in trouble. And that's where the Panthers are at right now. Their starting center and backup center are banged up, and they're playing against a Falcons team that gets better every week. And honestly, if not for a bad no call in the end zone against the Chiefs, it's possible the Falcons are on a 4-game win streak heading into this game. Instead, they've won 3 of their last 4. I know he threw for 500 yards. I still think Kirk Cousins isn't 100% totally there yet. There were some throws that I thought where he was just missing some zip on, but there were plenty against the Bucks where you said, okay, that's Kirk Cousins. He is getting there. But that was just his first game over 250 passing yards this year. Bijan Robinson was slowed by a hamstring. You've seen Algier come in. He's a really good backup running back. Looks like Bijan's healthy and ready to go. So they'll have the 1-2 punch there. You're just still waiting for a second receiver to step up for the Falcons. Pitts had a big game, 8 catches last week. So maybe that's an awakening. Mooney has has been a very good pickup for them. But no major injuries for the Falcons going into this game. It could be a pretty big win for them. All right, we go back to London. The Jags are at the Bears now. It's a Bears home. The Bears are 2.5 point favorites here. I mean, I don't know how you want to call this if it's a home or a road game. I mean, it's the London game. The Bears are technically the home team, but we know that Shad Khan, the owner of the Jags, loves these London games. He's a big London guy, and he'd probably prefer his own Jaguars to play 8 games in London each year. But he's got bigger fish to fry because no coach and quarterback were under more pressure last week than Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence. And they responded with easily their best game of the year, their best offensive game, and they got their first win over the Colts 37-34. Lawrence completed 82%. He threw for 371 yards. So here's the question. Can they do it again? Can they do it 2 weeks in a row and show it's not a fluke? And can they do it against a Bears team that is 3-2? They're getting a lot better, and they have a very good defense. Can Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson and Press Taylor figure it out again? Or did they lose in London, and does Doug Peterson become the second coach to lose a game in London and find himself on the chopping block when he gets back across the pond? Because Shad Khan does not want to see this team take another step in the wrong direction. They collapsed at the end of last year. They collapsed to start this year. So finally got a win. They need to start stacking wins. And if you're the Jags, yeah, the Bears are playing better, but that's a team you have to beat. You're not even in Chicago. You're in London. They're the home team, but London is your home away from home. As for the Bears, they just have to continue to stick with the formula that I've been talking about in this show. Run the ball, rely on your defense, allow Caleb Williams to continue to grow into the position as he's done the last 2 weeks. He's not throwing the ball 50 times. He is making some good throws on ones they asked him to, but they're relying on their run game, their offensive line to get dirty in the trenches first. They've gotten 2 big games out of DeAndre Swift in a row. They've gotten no interceptions from Williams over the last 2 games. They beat the Rams. They beat the Panthers. That is their formula. They can win this game. They've held 4 of their 5 opponents this year under 20 points. That's how good their defense is. Now they're down Jaquan Brisker, the safety. They've got a couple other starters beat up in the secondary, and you're facing a Jags team that did come alive and at least for 1 week found itself offensively. But stick to the plan. Play defense, run the ball, and as you see week after week, Caleb Williams will start to pay more and more dividends for you as he gets more comfortable and as he gets a relationship with Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze and DJ Moore. Bears can win this game. Bears win this game, they will be 4-2, and that'll be quite impressive. Now, will you start talking about them with the Vikings and the Lions and the Packers? No, but you play really good defense like that, and you could say, hey, you can win. Maybe you pull off a surprise. You can definitely start thinking about them as a wild card team if they win the game and go to 4-2. Browns Eagles. Obviously, we'll get into that on Inside the Birds pregame show that'll be out Sunday morning. Listen, the Browns have been a get right team for almost everybody they've played. All right, their only win has come over the Jaguars. They've got injuries all over the place. They've been dealing with injuries on the offensive line. We'll cover that in the pregame show. And now they got injuries in the secondary. We'll see if Denzel Ward plays. If Denzel Ward does not play, and it looks like Delpit, their safety, who's really good, is not going to play either. If Ward doesn't play, forget it. If the Eagles can't get right against the Browns defense with all the injuries that they have, forget it. That's going to signal major issues for the Eagles offense ahead. Eagles are, I believe it's up to 9 now, 9-point favorites at home against the Browns. All right, 4 o'clock games. I mentioned all 3 road teams are favorites. The one that really is interesting to me is Chargers at Broncos. Chargers are 3-point favorites. They're 2-2 coming out of the bye week. Their big thing is just getting healthy. They had lost 2 straight going into the bye, and their offense really went into the tank. Herbert was banged up. The tackles, Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater, were banged up. So we'll see if they're a little bit healthier. Herbert is expected to play. We'll see what's going on with the offensive line. They really don't have a whole lot of prolific weapons. J.K. Dobbins is off to a great start. You always know when Dobbins is healthy, he's a great running back. He just hasn't been healthy, obviously. They haven't gotten what they've wanted so far out of Gus Edwards. So I'm going to give you a name to watch, a rookie running back that they drafted day 3. His name is Kamani Vidal. All right. He's going to be the number 2 running back in this game. And you know that Harbaugh loves to run the ball, likes to get his carries spread out. So look for Kamani Vidal, who's got some juice to him, probably more than you would get from Gus Edwards. Um, he's got some juice. He can run. He's fast. So look for Kamani Vidal to get some carries alongside J.K. Dobbins because they don't want to run Dobbins into the ground based on his history. And we'll see if the Chargers can get that running game going against a Broncos defense that has been fantastic. I mean, this Broncos defense is, I don't want to say solely responsible, but probably 90% responsible for the fact that the Broncos are 3-2 after starting off 0-2, right? And they've had three pretty relatively good wins. And, they beat the Jets. Obviously, that was a nice little win. You saw that in their last win, Nix and Peyton had a little sideline spat. Anybody who knows Sean Payton and how he reacts with his quarterbacks know that that's not necessarily a bad sign, and B, it was probably going to come at some point anyway, just a little earlier than we expected. But look, the Broncos have scored 26 or more in 2 of their last 3. They are not a great offensive team, but Nix does get better every week. The offense looks more functional. Uh, they creamed the Raiders, right? And that's usually a game that it's a rivalry game. It's an intense game. The teams don't like each other. We know that. There's a history of Broncos Raiders. So for the Broncos to be so offensively challenged, but cream a Raiders team that I get is banged up and not very good, but still, I don't look at this Broncos team and see a ton of talent. But for that to have happened shows you that they are on a good trajectory. And this should be a really good game. I imagine it will be a low scoring game between 2 teams that are trying to run the ball, trying to pace their offense methodically, and really play some really good defense. Lions and Cowboys. Lions are 3-point favorites in Dallas. The Cowboys have taken advantage of their schedule to get their defense right. Remember they gave up 72 points in back-to-back losses to the Saints in Baltimore. They've played way better defense over the last 2 weeks. Now, granted, again, the schedule, they played the Giants and they played the Steelers. So take that with what you will. But they've also been without Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. Their offense continues to do just enough without getting a great running game and without much complementary weapons for CeeDee Lamb for the Cowboys to score just enough points to beat teams that don't have very good offenses. Well, guess what? The Lions have a good offense. All right. The Lions can run the ball really well with Gibbs and with Montgomery. They can throw the ball to their running backs. They can throw the ball to their wide receivers at multiple levels. You got Laporta, you got Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now you have an established deep threat in Jameson Williams, who's coming on into their own. And oh, by the way, the Lions have a very good defense. Now they've been a little inconsistent this year, a little bit. So I'm not sure what to expect. But the Lions right now are a far better team than the Cowboys, and they're a far more complete team. And as I've said since the beginning of training camp, and maybe in the offseason, the Lions are my pick to go to the Super Bowl for the NFC East. I'm sorry, for the NFC. And as of right now, I'm not backing down off that. Steelers at Raiders. I mentioned that maybe no coach and quarterback under scrutiny last week more than Trevor Lawrence. Now this week, that target moves to Justin Fields as he aims to keep his job after the Steelers have not looked great offensively in their last 2 games. They started off 3-0. They now have back-to-back losses to the Colts and to the Cowboys. Their offense has not looked great. Something's going on with George Pickens. They're not playing him as much. There looks like there's a little bit of turmoil. And as we know, Russell Wilson, the guy they brought in the offseason, who was originally supposed to be the starter, he's getting healthier, back at practice, ready to go. So the spotlight is clearly on Justin Fields against a bad Raiders team to be able to move the ball, make good throws, and keep his job. The Raiders are on the verge of becoming a disaster. They have injuries all over the place. They just got creamed by the Broncos that we talked about. They have no firepower. They have to rely. They're going to Aiden O'Connell, so another quarterback switch. I guess Gardner Minshew didn't give them what they wanted. I think this is a big test for Antonio Pierce, to get his players to continue to play hard, to buy in. You heard him call out his players a couple of weeks ago. Then they go and get killed by Denver. He's got to get these guys to buy in while everything around the team is in flux. Obviously, the Devontae Adams situation is affecting them. He's not playing. He wants to be traded. I don't see how the Raiders are going to score enough points against this Steelers defense to win the game. They're basically going to have to force feed Brock Bowers 10 to 15 passes, but even he alone, I don't think can beat the Steelers defense. But there is a pressure on Justin Fields to keep the job. And we're going to see what's going to go on there. And this is going to be a very interesting offensive game plan for Arthur Smith and for Justin Fields because Russell Wilson's there. He's looking over the shoulder. All right, the 8 o'clock game, Bengals, another road favorite, 3-point favorites over the Giants. Now, this one, right? This is the one you might say, well, wait a minute, hold on. The Bengals are 1-4. Okay. The Bengals are 1-4, and they just invent ways to lose. The Giants are just coming back from a really impressive win over Seattle. The Giants have looked better over the last few weeks than people have given them credit for. Yes, they lost to the Cowboys 2015. I think people thought they were going to get killed by the Cowboys. The Giants have won 2 of the last 3. And not only did they beat the Seattle Seahawks 29-20, they did it without Malik Nabers. They did it without Devin Singletary. You got to give Brian Daboll and his staff credit. They coached their ass off. That was a huge win against the Seahawks, especially without those guys. And they've got injuries on defense too. They won't have Kayvon Thibodeau today. And Nabers is still out. So maybe that's why you're looking at the Bengals and saying the Giants can't do this twice. They cannot win 2 of these games in a row without Nabers with their injuries. But listen, the Bengals invent ways to lose. You watched that game against the Ravens last week. You can't lose a game where you get 6 touchdown passes from Joe Burrow when you get the game that you got from Jamar Chase. But they turn the ball over. They miss. They have special teams guffaws. This is what the Bengals do every year. They start off in the biggest hole, and then all of a sudden the quarterback catches fire when he's healthy, and then the next thing you know, they reel off 3-4 wins in a row. And hey, all of a sudden the Bengals are looking good again. This is what they do. And by the way, it doesn't hurt them that the Browns have stunk so far, and that Pittsburgh's lost 2 in a row, and that Baltimore lost too early. So despite their 1-4 record, the Bengals are looking up and say, if we can beat the Giants and go to 2-4 today, even if Baltimore and Pittsburgh both win, we're only 2 games behind. One of those teams loses, all right, we get to climb up and make them some space there. All we got to do is beat the Giants. Can we beat the Giants? Can we outscore them? We should be able to outscore them. Can we play some defense? That's really all the Bengals have to do. Figure out a way to play defense. They've always been going into this year to last year, really, a defense that didn't have a whole lot of stars on them, but their defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo, known as one of the better schematic defensive head coaches, switches things up in the middle of his games, makes adjustments. Last year, they started getting leaky. They thought they fixed that. This year, they've been even leakier. I mean, they just give up explosive play after explosive play. And if Nabers was playing in this game, I might give the Giants a lot more credit. Now, Slayton does what he does. Darius Slayton is always that guy for the Giants who steps in there and makes big catches when nobody remembers who he is. And he did it against the Seahawks, so maybe he does it against the Bengals. I just think that right now the Bengals are roaring on offense, and even though they're on the road, and even though the Giants are coming off a big win, I don't know that the Giants can do this twice. Monday night, the spotlight game, the Bills 2.5-point favorites, again, road favorites, going to the MetLife Stadium to play the Jets. Look, the Bills got fat on 3 bad teams. They look great with all their changes on offense. They were 3-0, and then they really, found out that their schedule was going to get a lot tougher, and they hit the skids a little bit. They lost the Texans in one of their losses, and then the Ravens was another. So the Bills really need to get back on track now that they're playing a team, and this is a big game for them, right? Think about it. They were 3-0, so they were probably thinking with the Jets in their turmoil and with the Bills off to a 3-0 start, things were looking good for them. Well, the Jets are 2-3, the Bills are 3-2, and if the Jets win this game, which again makes you wonder why they fired their head coach, if the Jets win this game, they are tied at the top of the AFC East. So basically, Buffalo has got to get back on track offensively. They're still waiting for somebody to step up as their major offensive weapon. We'll see Khalil Shakir if he's been banged up. We'll see if he can contribute. If not, they're gonna have to get Dalton Kincaid more involved. Mac Hollins, they've got to get more consistency on offense. Josh Allen has had 2 bad games in a row, and he needs to figure out who his reliable targets are and get the ball to them. So the last thing the Bills want is to be able to give the Jets a new life with their new head coach, their new play caller. This is a big game. They can go to 2-0 in division, and after this game, the Bills will have Tennessee and Seattle up next. So if you win the game and you're the Bills, you're feeling good about your place in the AFC East and your schedule coming up. If you lose and suddenly the Jets are tied with you atop the division, and then Miami coming out of the bye week, they might get Tua back at some point after that. Then all of a sudden, the AFC East looks a lot tighter. Big game there. All right, as I always do, I'll give you my 3 picks here at the end. Now, I'm reminding everybody, I started off 0-6 after the first 2 weeks. I am now 7-8 overall on my picks with the spread here. So that means that I am 7-2 over the last 2 weeks, which I'm pretty happy about, or 3 weeks. Last week I won on the Packers 3.5 over the Rams. They covered. I won on the Broncos covering 3 over the Raiders. That was big. But I did lose on Seattle, losing outright to the Giants. I had Seattle covering against the Giants to 6 points. So I went 2-1 last week. This week, I am taking the Steelers to beat the Raiders, even in Las Vegas, to cover the 3-point spread. I wrestled with this one, but I just feel like the Ravens are playing really well. And even though the Commanders are playing well and as good as anybody, not sure that they're ready to go into Baltimore and compete the way the Ravens have been playing right now. I think the Ravens will exploit Washington's pass defense a little more than other teams have been able to. So I will take the Ravens giving 6.5 to the Commanders at home. And I just think the Carolina Panthers are not fit right now to be able to hang with the Falcons with all their injuries and with their overall lack of talent on the 53. So I will take the Falcons to cover the 6-point spread in Carolina. All right, that'll do it for the Week 6 NFL preview. Catch you guys on the next one.